Hi, welcome to this lesson. We're going to look at control flow in this lesson. And for that, I'm just going to create a new class. Just hover your mouse over here, right click and go to new class. And we're going to call this class control flow because that is the topic of this lesson. And we're going to select the main method that is going to be the starting point of the application. And inside of this method is where I'm going to show you some examples. So control flow, the idea of control flow comes from the keywords if, else, if, then, else. You may have heard it from other programming languages, but basically the idea to branch out into multiple directions. If this happens, then do this, otherwise do this. And that type of functionality in any programming language is crucial to be able to write arbitrarily complex software. So we're going to look at if-else statements, and after that we're going to look at the switch statement. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is define a variable. It's going to be of type Boolean, all right? And I'm going to create an if statement. So if hungry, then do this, else do what's in these brackets, okay? So this is exactly how this statement, the way it's read is exactly how the computer is going to execute. Remember, because code is executed line by line. So it starts here, moves to the next line, moves to the next line in that order, right? Line by line. But sometimes you want to be able to skip over lines that are not part of the logic. And this if-else statement allows you to do that, to control the flow of the execution, okay? Now, the way if-else statements work is in the if block, there is a test. Inside of these parentheses, it's going to check for whether whatever value is in there, is it true or false? If it's true, and only if it's true, the if block, what's inside of the parentheses is going to execute. Otherwise it's going to jump over to the else block, okay? Very important to keep in mind. So whatever's in parentheses, only if it's true, the if block will be executed. Otherwise, it will jump over into the else block. So right now, this test, think of this as a test. If hungry, then do this, else do this. Now it's giving an error here. If you hover your mouse over this word, it's saying initialize the variable. Right? We haven't given it any value. We're just declaring the variable. We're saying this variable is going to contain Boolean data, but we haven't actually given it any data. So let's assign it to true. Okay? And don't forget the equal sign there. So now the error is gone. Inside of this if statement, I'm going to print out, and by the way, the shortcut for using the print line statement is you just type sys out, press the control key and hit the space bar, and that will fill the rest of the statement for you. That's an Eclipse shortcut. So in the print statement, I'm just going to say I'm starving. All right. Otherwise, right, in the else statement, I'm not hungry. So when I run this program, what do you think is going to happen? Well, let's hit play and notice that it's saying I'm starving. And the reason for that is because hungry was true. We set hungry to true, and that is why this part is running. This will never be executed, okay? So again, line by line, the computer program is executing. So it goes to the first line, it goes to the second line, then the third line, and sees this statement, and it checks if hungry. And since hungry is true, it's going to execute that. It's not going to go here. It's just going to jump over out to here and go to bigger and better code, whatever follows after the if-else statement. All right. So there are two ways to do this. You could either do if hungry is equal true. Right. This is going to do exactly the same thing. Or if you just leave that out, whatever is the result of inside of the parentheses, whatever that evaluates to, whether it's true or false, the computer is going to understand. So for example, 2 is equal to 2. And by the way, right now I'm using two equal statements. This is for equality. I'm not assigning anything. A single equal sign is for assigning, right? I'm assigning the value true to the variable hungry. These two equal signs is used to compare. Is the number 2 equal to the number 2? Yes, it is. So this statement will always run, and it'll never execute what's inside of the else statement. All right, so let's hit play and notice that it's gonna, of course, always print I'm starving. So whatever is inside of here is evaluated. Think of it as a test, either evaluate to true or false. I can also do less than, okay? And of course, this is not true. 2 is not less than 2. 2 is supposed to be equal to 2, right? So you see the yellow lines underneath? This is showing a warning. If you hover your mouse here, it's saying dead code. The reason for that is because this will never be executed, okay? You might as well not even have it here, because 2 is never going to be less than 2. So again, whatever's in these parentheses is either evaluated to true or false. So if I just say hungry, this is evaluated, and guess what its value is? Its value is true. So of course it's going to run this. If I change this to false, then of course this part will not be validated, and it'll just jump to the else. So let's hit play, and notice it's saying I'm not hungry. Now, one more thing I want to show you about this evaluation inside of these parentheses is you can introduce something called a not operator. And the not operator is often referred to as a bang or the exclamation point, and it looks like this. Notice I put an exclamation point there. And what this does is just negates whatever is the value after it, whatever value follows it. It negates that. So over here we said hungry is false. So having this exclamation point before it is going to say not. Think of this as not. So this entire statement. This entire statement inside of these parentheses is going to be evaluated, and not false evaluates to, of course, true, right? If something is not false, then what is it? It's true. Then this line is going to be executed. What's inside of here is going to run because of this not. If I change this to true, because I changed this to true, now it's going to execute the second part. So just some examples to explain to you the usage of the not operator and the if-else statement. So just keep these things in mind. I got rid of the exclamation point. I'm going to hit run, and this brings us back to the way the code was before. So continuing on, let's go over another example. Let's say I have a variable called hunger rating. Okay, and this is basically a rating that's given to someone depending on how hungry they are, from 1 to 10. Right now I am about a 5, and so I can make an if statement, and that's going to say hunger rating. If hunger rating is less than 6, then you can print out not hungry. Okay? Else I am starving. So if the hunger rating is less than, if the variable called hunger rating, if the data that it contains is less than 6, right, then this is going to be executed. Otherwise, this will be executed. So in this example, what do you think is going to run? It's of course going to be this first statement right here, first if block. It's not even going to go to the else. Now again, if I put an exclamation point here, now it's giving me an error with including this exclamation point, is because it thinks that there's one variable, but then it's like, oh wait, what is this stuff? The reason for that is because we need to evaluate this as an expression. This exclamation point doesn't know whether I should be negating this or this entire statement. So what we need to do is give it a surround parentheses around the statement that we are trying to negate. Okay? So now this is going to check for if not this. So what does this mean now? Inside of these parentheses, what is that going to evaluate to? Hunger rating, is this variable, the data that this variable contains, is that less than 6? Yes, it is. So this expression inside of these inner parentheses is going to evaluate to true. But because I have this exclamation point, it's going to negate that. And it's going to say not true. All right, not true. So if not true, of course, in this situation, it's going to print the second part, I'm starving. So let's hit the run button and notice it's saying I'm starving right here. This is the second printout right here. All right. So you can have these comparisons. This is a less than operator, meaning what's in here is that, and this is a test. Think of it as a test inside of these if statements. Is this less than this, right? The closed angle points to the smaller thing, and the open side points to the larger thing. So we're basically comparing, is this less than this? And with this exclamation point, we are negating, and that's why this else clause is running. So taking this even further, let's look at some other if-else examples. I'm going to define a variable called favorite temperature, temp, and I'm going to say my favorite temp is 75 degrees, okay? And the current temperature, that could be something else, right? The current temperature may not be my favorite. Current temperature might be, let's make it 60. And then I'm going to define another variable of type string, and it's going to be called opinion, okay? So my opinion is going to be based on how cold it is. So I'm going to create some if-else statements so you can see some more examples here. So if the current temperature is less than my favorite minus 30, let me just put favorite temp here. So if the current temperature, which we set to be 60, if that's less than my favorite temperature minus 30, then we're going to state an opinion. We're going to say the opinion is it's pretty darn cold. So at this point, of course, this is not going to run because guess what? Our current temperature is 60, right? It's not 30 less. It's only 15 less. So this piece is never going to run according to our current temperature. So I can have an else if clause, and we can say if current temp is less than favorite temp minus 20, right? If the current temperature, whatever it is less than the favorite temperature minus 20, then it's going to run what's in here. And we're just going to set the opinion to be the following sentence. It's kind of cold out. All right. And then I'm just going to have one more check. Else if the current temp is greater than the favorite temp plus 10. In this case, I'm going to write, I'm going to give the opinion that it's a little hot out. Otherwise, if it's any other temperature, if it's any other situation, it's going to go to this final block, which is going to give the opinion that it's a beautiful day. And then down here, I'm just going to print out the result of my opinion, which will be, set based on these situations. So right now, the current temperature is 60. So I've given you this if-else, else-if statement. So what's going on here is if this evaluates to true, then this is going to happen. And once this occurs, it's going to break out of this if-else thing and come down to here directly, all right? If this is not true, it's going to check in this else-if condition. If this is not true, it's going to move to this one. If this is not true, this is going to go into this block right here, okay, in that order. Remember, everything in programming starts from the top to bottom or in order. But with these if-else clauses, we can branch out into different situations and skip over things, right? So that's exactly what's going on here. If the current temperature is 60 and the favorite temperature is 75, and we're checking here if 60 is less than 75 minus 30, which of course it's not. So this evaluates to false. So since this evaluates to false, it's going to move to the next else if condition, and it's going to do the same exact check. Is the current temperature, which is 60, is that less than the favorite temp minus 20? It's checking if current temp 60 is less than 55. Of course it's not. So what is this going to evaluate to? This will also evaluate to false. So it's going to move to this check right here. Is current temp greater than the favorite temp plus 10? If it's not greater than that, which in this case it's not, it's only 60, it's not greater than favorite temp plus 10. So in this case, it's going to move to this else block, and it's going to print out it's a beautiful day today. All right. So let's hit the play button and notice that it's saying it's a beautiful day. All right. So very important to keep in mind that once it executes one of these, once it goes into one of these conditions, it could be the first one, the second, third, whatever. After it is done executing that condition, it's going to jump out. It's going to jump out of all of these if-else's and move to the whatever follows, all right? So only one of these needs to evaluate to true, and then it's going to jump out of that. So let's see how this is going to be changed if I change the current temperature, right? Our favorite temperature is not going to change. This is my favorite temperature, 75. But the current temperature could go down to, for example, 20 degrees. In this case, I expect it's pretty darn cold out, right? I want this to be printed to the screen. And with this setup, this is exactly what's going to happen. It's going to print this because current temp is 20. Is that less than the favorite temp minus 30? Yes, it is. So what's going to be evaluated out of this is going to be true, right? So since this is true, this is going to run. So let's hit play and notice that it's saying it's pretty darn cold out. Now let's say the temperature is pretty high. Let's make it 100 degrees, the current temperature. My favorite temperature is still 75. So in that case, what does this evaluate to? This will evaluate to false. So it's not going to execute this. What is this going to evaluate to? This is also going to evaluate to false. So it's not going to execute this. What is this going to evaluate to? This statement right here. Is current temp greater than the favorite temp plus 10? Yes, it is. 100 is greater than 85 degrees. So this evaluates to true, and in that situation, it will execute what's in these brackets, and then it'll jump out here. It's not even going to check what's left. Okay, it's going to jump out to the next line. So let's hit play and notice it's saying it's hot out. Now there's just a few more things I want to go over before we end this lesson. Just a quick review. Remember the first statement we had, this if statement where we're checking if hungry. Whatever's in here is evaluated to either true or false. Another way to do this is we can use the equal sign and then compare it with whatever it is that we're comparing. Like I showed you earlier, we could just put true here and that would do the same thing. Like I'm doing down here, if hunger rating is less than 6, I can change that to equal. And that's going to be checking for whether hunger rating is equal to 6, okay? This double equals means comparison. We're checking for equality, whereas a single equal sign is used for assignment, where we are assigning the number 5 to hunger rating. And then this not operator is going to negate whatever follows. So instead of this equal, I can also do not equal, okay? And now it's checking for whether hunger rating is not equal to 6. So in this case, we know that hunger rating is 5. So what would just this piece, what would that evaluate to? Well, it's going to evaluate to true because hunger rating is indeed not equal to 6, okay? But because we have this negation operator, it's not going to go into this block. It's actually going to go into this block. It's going to jump over. It's going to jump over this statement. It's not even going to execute this. It's just going to jump into the else block. Okay. So keep that in mind. The not equals, the equal is used for checking equality, and then we have some other options with the less than and greater than. Here we're checking for whether current temp is less than favorite temp minus 30. We can check for whether it's less than or equal to by just adding that equal sign right there that I just did. Current temp is less than or equal to this side, all right? And when I have calculations like this where favorite temp minus 30 or whatever, it's a good idea to just wrap this inside of parentheses just so that it's evaluated 100% accurately. This is actually very similar to basic math in algebra, where you have to solve what's in the parentheses first and then solve the rest of the equation. So just keep that in mind. In this case, it doesn't really matter, but if this calculation was more complex, it would be a good idea to add those parentheses so we can ensure what runs first and what runs next. So we have less than or equal to here. I could change that to greater than or equal to right here. All right, so that option is also available. Another thing is I can have an if statement inside of an if statement. So this entire block I can wrap inside of some other if statement. So for example, I could do if the favorite temp is equal to the current temp, all right, if favorite temp is equal to current temp, then it's going to execute what's in here. Otherwise, this stuff is not going to be run. So currently, current temp is 100, whereas favorite temp is 75. So this will evaluate to false because favorite temp is not equal to current temp. Since this evaluates to false, it's not going to run any of these. It's going to jump out here and try to execute the statement. Now notice that there is an error on this line. If you hover your mouse over this red line, it's going to give you the error saying the local variable opinion may not have been initialized. So the Eclipse compiler is smart enough to realize that, hey, this opinion variable, we're not setting it to anything, and you have this if statement. There's a chance that this if statement might never run, right? What's in here may never run depending on whatever this condition evaluates to. And since that's the only place you're assigning something to the opinion variable, there's a risk of it not being assigned. So to eliminate this error, we can either give this a default value up here. For example, we can give it null. It's not going to have anything in there. It's just going to be null. Or instead of giving it a value there, we can have an else clause. All right, because remember, if this doesn't run, then this runs. Okay, one or the other. One of these must run, either the if clause or the else clause. So in this case, current temp is not equal to favorite temp, so it's going to jump directly into the else clause. And over here, I can assign opinion to invalid or unknown temperature, for example, unknown temp. Okay, so I just wanted to highlight the point that you can have if-else statements like this inside of other ifs and elses. Okay, so you can nest this as many times as you want. Inside of this if statement, I can further have if statements and else statements. So it can get pretty hairy. For the computer, it's not a problem. As long as your code is accurate, it's going to do what it needs to. But for readability purposes, having too many ifs inside of other ifs, things can get pretty hairy to look at. All right. So moving on, there's just one more concept that I'd like to cover, and that is the switch statement. The switch statement also allows us to control the flow of the application, right? Remember, the default flow of any code is it goes line by line executing each line of instruction. And when it gets to an if statement, it has a decision whether to execute what's in here, or if it's not true, it'll jump to the following section of the code. So we can control the flow and jump over things that are not relevant to the logic that we are trying to execute. So we can do that using if-else statements, but there's another structure that does a similar kind of thing, and that's called switch. So let me go over an example of that. First, I'm going to define a variable called month, and let's say this month is the month 6, which is going to be the month of June, all right? And I can have another variable called month string. And this is supposed to contain the word January, February, March, April, whatever month it is. I'm going to assign this variable that string value. And I'm going to do it inside of this switch statement that I'm about to show you. So we could do switch month, and in here, the way this is going to work is based on cases, we can have certain instructions be executed. So for example, I can have a case 1 month string is equal to January. So what this is doing is it's going to check whether the variable month, the data that it contains, is that equal to 1. And if it is, then this line will be executed. And after this line is executed, it's going to break. This break keyword is used to exit out of the switch statement and move on to bigger and better things in the code. All right, I'm going to go into more detail about the break keyword in a little bit. Otherwise, we can have another case statement, case 2, where the month string is going to be assigned to February. So again, this statement, this line is checking for whether this variable contains the number 2, all right? And if it does, then this instruction will be executed. Outside of this, we just want to break. Case 3, month string is going to be equal to March. And then we need the break. And let's just have one more case. Case 4, month string should be assigned April. All right, so based on, and then of course we need the break right here. So based on what the value of this variable is, that particular case is going to be executed. So each one of these cases is going to be compared with the variable's value. So if the month is 1, it's going to execute this case and break out of this statement and move on to bigger and better code out here, okay? If the month has the value 2, then it's going to come into this statement and execute this. And as soon as it assigns February to month string, it's going to break out of that. If the month variable contains the number 3, then it would execute this statement and break out of here, right? And come out to bigger and better code. So in our case, none of these cases would be executed. None of them. Because our month, the data that is contained in the month variable is 6. So for that situation, I can have a default case. And in the default means anything other than these cases, I want the month string to be assigned the value, unknown month. All right, so for each case, it's going to do two things. It's going to assign the month string variable with the data that's given, and then it's going to break out. Okay, so as soon as it sees a case that satisfies, it's going to execute the instruction and break. When it hits the break, that means it's going to exit this entire switch block and come out of the block and move on to bigger and better things. It's not going to check any other cases. Okay, as soon as a particular case is satisfied, it breaks out of that entire switch construct. So far, if I change this to, for example, the number 4, it's going to go line by line and it's going to enter the switch statement and it's going to go to the first check. Is month equal to 1? No, it's not. Is month equal to 2? No, it's not. Is month equal to 3? No, it's not. Is month equal to 4? Yes, it is. So then it's going to execute this instruction and then it's going to break out of here and move on to bigger and better things outside of this switch statement. All right. Now, a good idea to use switch is when there are many decisions. So over here we have 5 decisions to be made and one of them must be satisfied. Either the month contains the number 1, 2, 3, 4, or it doesn't contain any of these, and that's the 5th decision right here. This is one way of doing it, or you can use an else if setup, where if this is not it, then else if, else if, else if, else if. Typically, when you have many else ifs, it's probably a good idea to just switch to the switch statement because the syntax is a bit more reader friendly. But it works exactly the same way as the else if. There are some limitations to the switch as far as what you can have inside of these parentheses, but for the most part, you can make things work using strings, characters, integers, shorts, bytes, and enumerations, which we'll look at much later in the course. But anyway, there's a lot of information here for you to digest. So take your time to review this class and understand this code thoroughly before moving on to the next lesson. So there's just one little thing I want to do here before we end this lesson. I just want to print out the value of the month string so you can see what it's going to be printed. So let's hit play and notice it's going to print April. If we change this month to the number 2, I expect February to be printed out, and here it is. All right, so let's wrap it up here. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next lesson.